night.
Okay.
Leslie's comedy hour. I'm definitely not as organized as Chris. He
Only a
knew,
few people are.
he knew how to chair a meeting.
Oh, he was good.
Once there. It's got it muted though.
Oh, right, so we don't have it echoing off 10
It looks like
speakers.
looks like it's already muted, so. Right, or Jane? I bet Charles took care of that. I think we're set to go.
Okay, we can call the meeting to order at
You're good now.
3:33. Are we good, Charles? All right, excellent. Welcome to our new member, July, and welcome back to everybody else who hasn't met in quite a while. I think, do we have any
We
agenda?
should probably note that Chuck is remote.
Yes.
And he meets a unique circumstance requirement, so he can fully participate because there's a quorum in person. And he has full voting rights, remote.
Great, excellent. If we have anything to vote on, we will have Chuck to vote. Do we have any additions to the agenda or deletions or anything of that nature? It doesn't look like we have any members of the public in person for comment, any
Nor remote.
remote comments? Okay, very good. Review of the minutes from July 9th. Was that even this year?
2024.
Holy moly. It's been a while.
The minutes.
You moved the minutes?
I moved the minutes.
Excellent.
Second.
Derek will second. Any comments or corrections? I don't have any nitpicky things to correct because I wasn't there, so I didn't
Right.
review them. All in favor of approving the minutes as they are? You can
Aye.
vote or not.
Because I was not there.
Okay, all right. We have 4 in favor and 1 abstention. And on to new business. We have some changes to the whole inland island situation. Nels, would you like to give us the background? What's that?
I said a few changes.
A few changes, a few status changes.
Yeah, the
Nels.
project's been in the works since at least 2021. When we selected a preferred developer, or what we call a sponsor for undertaking the urban renewal project.
Yeah.
We had progress where there was a conceptual plan that was agreed to by the developer and the IURA. And then we moved to address the issue that impacted a time schedule, which was the DEC negotiations to acquire the Coast Guard Auxiliary site at the end of the island, which was in a part of the project site where the proposed hotel was located. So those negotiations we thought were gonna be relatively swift, turned out to be quite extended. There was a lot of work with both the DEC and the Coast Guard Auxiliary to address their concerns and needs. And we came to a conceptual agreement earlier this year in 2024, which allowed us to then pick up where we left off, which was the developer was committed to move forward with a site plan submission to the planning board, including the full seeker environmental review materials, and had been indicated a goal of doing that by October. It involved a transportation study, it involved redesigning the hotel because of the flood regulations, which would then also redesign the parking lot, and the circulation plan, as well as defining the subsurface contamination and providing a cost estimate for what the cleanup would cost. And there were probably a few other studies associated with seeker that they would have had to have done as well. It turns out that after April, they did not advance any of those elements forward. The development team was having concerns. It turns out, I found out in late November that about financial feasibility of the project. A lot of the project was initially conceived of kind of prior to the impact of the pandemic or the full impact. So there were clearly construction cost increases. Lenders were more conservative with providing lending funds, and the interest rate had gone up. So those things were all impacting. I found out in late November. And that's when we met, and they said that probably they couldn't proceed. However, there was this outside chance that they could bring in another hotel provider as a co-developer to rejuvenate the project, so to speak. I said, well, we're gonna have a meeting on it, in December at the ED committee, and right now it's gonna be a proposed resolution to terminate the exclusive negotiation agreement unless you bring in something very attractive, but prior to the time, I had to mail out the packet. They didn't provide any firm commitments or any change at that point. Just recently, they have indicated that they have identified a hotel developer who is interested, and they have asked for a 60-day extension of their exclusive negotiation agreement. I don't know a whole lot more. I know the name of the developing group, which has over 60 hotels in their portfolio, but that's really all I know at this point about where they are. So they've requested a 60-day extension, but they have not committed to a timeline or a revised project at this point. Just want to make it clear that we've received that, so we have that to consider. The resolution in your packet terminates the exclusive negotiation agreement. It would be a recommendation going forward to the the IURA, which meets December 20th. And apparently the original development team is meeting with this hotel group on the 17th. So in theory, no matter what action we take in recommendation, there would still be an opportunity to present something to the IURA on the 20th if it was, something they could put together. But historically with the IURA, we've been very careful to be equitable and fair about selecting developers. There were 3 applicants who applied for this opportunity the first time around, 2019 or so. And we selected Finger Lakes Development, but there were 2 others that were interested, and changing the development team now would mean that we would have to re-approve them as a different development entity than they were at the time, because we do a check of the qualifications and eligibility of each one of the individual principals. So we check to see whether they have any taxes that are unpaid or any violations of properties, and look to see if they have capability to undertake the project. So that would be a change we would have to go through if there was a change in the development team. So we have a couple of options now. We can go with the resolution is drafted, or we could look at some sort of time delay issue if you think that is appropriate. We also can kind of break up things in terms of what we do with the next step. If there is a termination of the exclusive developer agreement, then we eventually will have to decide what is the next step. And it could be reissue the RFP, or it could be the city and the IRA works to acquire the Coast Guard auxiliary property to eliminate that uncertainty that created a long timeline extension in this process. Or we can modify the RFP. We could rethink the whole project and say, maybe what we had in the original one is not what we want in 2024. But those are pretty lengthy discussions and processes, all those things. So those are kind of the choices that are on the table for you, and there probably are a few middle, opportunities there. One option would be not a 60-day extension, but a 30-day extension. You bring something back to this committee by January, or it's final. But actually, we don't have authority to kind of finalize things at the committee level because it all goes back to the IRA, but we can make a recommendation. So those are the options. I think that given the history here and where they're at, terminating the exclusive negotiation agreement makes sense to me, because it still gives them an opportunity to bring something to the IRA in 2 weeks or so. But it makes sure we're being scrupulously fair to everybody else who is interested in this property and open. And eventually I would hope we could lead to another offering of an RFP. But it doesn't include, that extends the timeline for everybody, including the IRA, as well as for the developer or a future developer under that scenario.
Nils, can we pause for 1 second? I'm the only one who's back on this committee as far back as this project was a concept for everyone. So I'm wondering, particularly Siobhan, if people need any background dots connected or pieces filled in, because it's been such a long road and it's been such a quagmire of delays and complications.
I was on council at the time, though.
So you remember the whole evolution of it. Derek or Siobhan, just like like, is any of this even making sense? If you're not really even sure where it all came from, it might all sound like still a lot of holes in the story.
I mean, I read through the agenda today, which was useful, laying some of it out, but if you have other background information about like what the goal of the project was, and I was trying to understand too, how much of it was going to be hotel versus any like residential
Yeah.
units. And like what the is partnering with a hotel developer even going to necessarily address some of the other issues that they're having with the feasibility of the project?
Yeah, those are good questions. The project kind of had three major elements in it. There was an affordable housing component with, I think, 57 housing units. There was the hotel, I say, four major elements, let's say. So those two were the big development pieces. Then there was a strong emphasis to activate the waterfront on Inlet Island for the general residents of the city to utilize. It's there as a resource, but it's not really developed and makes a lot, there's not a compelling reason to walk to Inlet Island. Even though it's got a nice waterfront, it's not really activated. So the goal was to activate it, have some, kayak canoe launches, a reason to walk along the waterfront, and get to the
Shops,
point.
restaurants.
Maybe some shops and
Yeah.
retails were ideal, but we realized that Inlet Island is a little off the beaten path for retail as well. You need a destination almost. And so that was the third one, was public access. The fourth one was trying to preserve water dependent uses on Inlet Island. Mainly the only boat launch, take in and take out on the southern part of the lake. Thinking Lansing might have some capacity, but mostly it's either the very north or it's what do we call it? Inlet Island. Well, the marina, the lift you see out there and the boats that are wrapped up. So those were the four kind of elements that were in the project. This proposal was able to address, well, I don't think we've ever called for a hotel. That was not like, we must have a hotel. That was just a project that was developed by the development team as a way to kind of finance the other components in many respects. So those were the four elements that were included in this project. There was a lot of discussion about the site design plan, but the IURA more or less said that's the planning board's function. We won't get into great detail on that. But there was a consideration or emphasis that it be designed to be site specific, that it wasn't just a hotel, side of the road kind of design. It had to fit into a kind of a urban environment, and this is a kind of waterfront. So those were the kind of core issues that were being discussed, and we thought that we had found kind of a fit with this project. So the developer was, the way they had structured it was they were gonna sell a parcel of land for the affordable housing development to that developer, and they would undertake that project separately. And the developer would undertake the hotel and the improvements along the public access themselves. So in some ways, the hotel was financing some of the other related costs of site plan and the development. Did I miss anything from your recollection, Leslie?
No, I think that's probably the gist of it, but I don't remember what you said a few moments ago about the process back when the original RFP was out. There were several, I think you mentioned this, there were several other potentially interested developers. And so several concepts were reviewed, and then this team was selected for the exclusive developer or preferred developer, whatever. I never remember the precise terminology.
The process
but
we go through
yeah.
is kind of a three-step process. One, we identify the developer as an eligible and qualified sponsor to undertake the project.
Right,
Which means that they can be approved through a negotiation sales process rather than an auction or fair market value kind of sale. Secondly, we enter into a cease negotiation agreement to give them, protect their interest in the property to spend money to develop the project. So they know it won't be sold to somebody else during that time period. And then third, we move to a disposition and development agreement, which is a lot like a purchase agreement with a lot of contingencies and conditions. Like, you agree, we will sell it to you at X price, which was fair market value, actually appraised value. And you agree to build affordable housing and a hotel and make these enhancements along the waterfront. So that we never got to the formal disposition and development agreement because we were moving from the exclusive negotiation agreement to that And we were trying to develop a timeline for that, and that's when the developer said, we can't really lock in that time frame until the DEC land negotiation is in place, because that will determine how fast they can move forward, because they need that land. That's where, that land is where part of the hotel is located. So that's where we got stuck.
For quite some time.
Yes, and that was in April where DEC agreed, after a lot of negotiations, to the final conceptual term sheet. I think the development team was involved with that process, and they knew it was moving towards conclusion. So they could have, initiated something earlier than April, but certainly by April, they had the rights to move forward and create a timeline for the development.
Quick question, so the four things that you had listed as part of the criteria for setting up the Inlet Island project,
So where exactly did those emerge from? Was that in committee? Was that through the general IURA? Was it in conjunction with the council? I'm not entirely sure.
It was probably all those things. I mean, there was a waterfront plan, phase 2 plan, as part of the 2015 comprehensive plan, and then they created chapters for various areas of the city. The waterfront plan was done around the time that we did the RFP, and it identified those characteristics they wanted to see on waterfront locations, particularly focusing on kind of mobility that didn't depend on automobiles, activating the waterfront, providing public access, basically a lot of the same things that I mentioned
Right.
where it was part of the project.
Where is the Coast Guard DEC transaction now?
The DEC has a license agreement with the Coast Guard Auxiliary that doesn't have an end date on it. But if they transfer the property to another owner, that terminates that license agreement. So DEC has agreed conceptually with the city to convey the property to the city in return for other rights on the island, easement areas to do dredge activity. So they would get a series of easement locations, permanent easement locations that would be in their control in exchange for conveying the Coast Guard Auxiliary, so-called Coast Guard Auxiliary property to the city. So
is it fair to say that that's no longer a constraint to the timeline,
yes,
regardless of who the developer is?
it's no longer a constraint in terms of conceptual agreement. The process of transferring property, even once you have an agreement, is probably 8 to 12 months. But so is our site plan review process, pretty much.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So if we agree to, if we approve this resolution and terminate the agreement and start all of it from the beginning, to what extent would common council be involved?
Common council gets involved at a couple of stages, usually very early and very late, although oftentimes developers want to have midpoint connection with the council to make sure they're still on board. So the council makes property for redevelopment available to the IRA early on and conveys an option to us to develop the urban renewal project. The conveyance to the IRA doesn't occur unless the common council approves the disposition development agreement at the end. They don't have to really be involved anywhere in between there unless they want to. Oftentimes, the IRA will clarify that these are the goals for the urban renewal project, identifying elements of it. And oftentimes the developer, after they've spent some money and know they have to spend more, want to go back to the council and say, here's what our project is. Does this look like this will be approvable for you at the end? Because while they spend quite a bit of money in conceptual, the real heavy expenditure is getting through the seeker and site plan review process in terms of hiring consultants to get through that process. And so we offer the developer that opportunity to come back to the council for an advisory opinion, essentially.
Because I remember when we talked about this so long on council, I had the feeling that council was asking way too much of the project, like squeezing every possible ideal scenario into this small damaged piece of land. So that is my recollection, probably when they were just trying to get advice and consent, or
Yeah, we brought, I mean, at the time when they were conveying the property or an option to the property, the IRA, there was discussion about, one member wanted to make sure there were fishing shacks and opportunities for small scale, retail operations. Others were interested in open space and some
Yes,
were interested in
right.
design. So you're right, there was a lot of interest, which was hard for the developer to meet all those
To accommodate.
objectives, yeah.
Have you heard privately from even the two developers who were rejected some years ago? Did they ever call and say, hey, might this reopen? Or are you not free to stay? Or
They have not reached out, but they would have no reason to think that the project is reopening for other developers, really.
well, except that it's obvious to the public that nothing's
Well,
happening.
that's true, yeah.
And was a hotel part of either of those plans? Or is that unique to this developer?
No, one of the other ones, Link Morse's project brought in a hotel developer as well. As part of their team, and part of that project. Vism's project, I don't believe I think it was focusing on housing at different income levels.
And the current iteration had what Steve called a hotel, right?
Yeah, I called it a hotel. It was an extended stay hotel kind of concept, but as we got closer to the project, it became a little more ordinary hotel, I think. It might have been an extended stay hotel, but I think the development team was open to a hotel, whatever would financially work on the project by the time we got to 2024. Yeah, he did call it a hotel, which is not a defined term anywhere I could find. But it was a little bit more where there would be less daily kind of housekeeping services and more ability to have longer term rentals. And I think it would appeal to people who were gonna stay for a week or maybe even a couple of weeks was the concept, thinking that this market didn't have that option. In some ways, it was a little bit like a custom built Airbnb
Yes,
was
right.
one concept that was discussed.
Nels, if we were to approve the resolution and terminate the exclusive agreement and reopen a new RFP, what would be the most streamlined, I think we all would love not to have to start back completely at square one. It doesn't seem like we should, right? So if we wanted to make a new RFP process that could get to market, so to speak, to be open as soon as possible, what's the timeline for that happening? Do we have to go back to Common Council and say, hi, guys, we're opening this up. We need you all to weigh in with your 47 different opinions. Or could we go and say, hey, we're gonna open up this RFP and we're gonna have it as broad and possible and see how many potentially interested proposals we can get? Or are we really looking at somewhere in between where there's gonna be some limitations on the RFP and some weigh-in from council, but hopefully not a year's worth?
Yeah, I'd have to review the resolutions that they passed, because I think at the time that they approved the conveyance of an option to the IRA, they didn't have strict standards attached to it. But having said that, we want to consult with them at some point to make sure we're on firm ground, because at the end, they do have to approve any
Right.
transaction. And we could emphasize those current elements we talked about and say we want those things. It doesn't have to be a hotel, but we probably do want affordable, some affordable housing would be ideal, the public access. I forgot to mention that there's a brownfield on the site that needs to be cleaned up, city-owned brownfield, as part of the redevelopment. The water dependent activity is very specific to Steve Flash, one of the developers, because he's the only owner of water dependent use on the island. So you might say it'd be nice to accommodate that, but it's not gonna be a driving factor if he's not part of the development team in all likelihood. So it would probably broaden it a little bit in that regard. But an RFP process to be legitimate and provide opportunity for developers to come forward probably needs to be a minimum 90 days open for projects to come forward. So, people to consider one of the options. So you know.
I guess I was
Timeline.
thinking more just us getting to the point where we open an RFP.
Oh, I get it.
Right, because the RFP wants to have some specific
Yeah.
uses defined or
Goals.
exactly, and I don't wanna see, I don't think anybody wants to see it take, a year to even define what our RFP is gonna ask for.
Yeah, I think if we were to go with the new RFP, it would make sense to advance the transaction with DEC and get that as an uncertainty out of the way, or at least advance that, so we can say, yeah, we think we really have this agreement in place. We've done the appraisals, we've done the surveys, and here's your development area you could do private development on, because these areas are gonna be used by DEC. It will open up the Coast Guard Auxiliary site, but it will foreclose some other aspects of the site. Would probably make sense to advance it enough so we feel comfortable with this, to know that that's gonna go forward. I think also we want to identify what are our goals and objectives, generally for redevelopment.
At this point, do we have a timeline or hope for a timeline when we think that the DEC situation can be firmly resolved and nailed down?
Well, we do have that conceptual agreement, the term sheet in place, so that's really good. We don't want to let it age too much because people change and, views change, so that would be something to move on, I think. We'll get to a point where there's a proposed land swap, and if the value of the Coast Guard Auxiliary property is higher than the value of the easements we're granting, then there is some cash involved that needs to be addressed. And so in the case of the current deal, the developer was gonna pay any costs associated with that, because they were gonna get the access to that land. If we do it ourselves up front, we may need to figure that out.
Mm.
The property would go to the city, is the way it's been negotiated with DEC. And that opens it, because it's a public municipality, there's some advantages to that. So, but I think we could do those things on a parallel track, work that out. Advance the implementation of the term sheet deal with DEC, and advance developing an RFP sometime in the first quarter of 2025. Holiday season is not a good time to do anything with RFPs anyway. So that would be one way to go, and we could update the council and hopefully get a yes to go forward.
By Q2?
Yeah,
So 90 days, we'd have hopefully new proposals in by Q3. Take a few months to review. It's a year.
Yeah.
But it's a year and we've got a new developer identified, not a year to even getting the RFP out the door. That was what I was more.
Well, hang, before we reject this developer, they said they want to come back in January. Is that right?
Yeah, they'd like 60 days to come back and bring in their co-developer, hotel operator, see if that would work.
And do you know whether they are, the goal would be to then sign up, sign an agreement at that point? Or is this just informational to make us feel better? I mean,
Well, my thought is that if they do bring in a co-developer and we agree to that, we would need to also have them commit to a very specific time schedule of progress steps, which we thought we had, that they were developing a site plan application and going through the environmental review process for a physical development project with the planning board. They've never submitted anything to the planning board yet. So that would be the way to make sure it advanced.
So maybe one thing to consider is hold off on doing the RFP work until we know whether this is real or not in January.
Well, I guess there's a question as to whether we owe them an extension of time to January. Nels, can you maybe?
I'm not saying don't, if we approve this resolution and we don't extend, they're still going to come in January, right?
If it goes to the IRA and the IRA supports the recommendation to terminate the exclusive negotiation agreement, I think they would read that as the deal is off. and they would have to come back as a new RFP respondent.
It seems likely they would not. I think they've been extended quite a few courtesies at this point, given the state of the development of their plan, which is not very advanced. But I guess they've already done some work, so
Right.
pros and cons or arguments in favor and against, can you
Yeah, I
summarize
mean,
those?
the pro is that they could salvage this original project by bringing in a co-developer who was actually a hotel developer. Neither of the development team members are hotel developers. And they could implement the original vision, you know, potentially, and in a financially feasible way with the development partner who has a portfolio of many hotels and knows how to develop physical projects. The con of that is that we would, you know, it could be viewed by others as not the original project, not the original development team. That, you know, they had plenty of time to recruit a different hotel developer, you know, if they wanted to find one months ago. I mean, there was no effort made to do that, nor was there any effort made to keep the IRA informed of their process and that they had kind of stopped advancing the project. So that would, you know, in that regard, they weren't fulfilling their side of the bargain, in my opinion, to keep the project moving. They were just letting the exclusive negotiation agreement keep them in a place where they had protection, but they weren't doing any work for it, in terms of site control. But it could salvage a lot of time on our side and work, because it could be the original vision that's kind of been shopped around. If the physical design of that hotel actually works on the island, which has become a challenge because the original design didn't meet the flood standards. And when you have to raise a building up, it creates a lot of other changes that have to occur. But we could ask them to propose, you know, show us how it's gonna look, a footprint at least, and see if that is consistent with the original conceptual plan that was approved by the agency. That's the pro side of it. The con side is kind of an equity issue, and you know, how long does this developer get to have control of this property without others having an opportunity? And they haven't really fulfilled their side of the bargain, I guess, and we're just extending more and more courtesies without, but it is December and nothing's gonna probably happen practically in the next 60 days in terms of, you know, moving it to a different place dramatically.
Quick question, so when the developers come in to meet with the IURA, is the general body, and if they come with a hotel developer, does that developer also have to go through the same process of review that the original developers went through? Like, is there a time commitment attached to that?
Yeah, we would have to then re-qualify the development team as qualified and eligible sponsors. If they change the ownership, you know, it's not just their right to just assign it out and sell it to other people. They've got to pass muster. So we would have to have an approval process to re-qualify the new revised development team sponsor group. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that would extend the timeline.
that would,
Even-
yeah, I mean,
I
in
don't know.
theory, it would be a one meeting. It's not trying to think. I don't think it would require more than one meeting. It might require a public hearing when you think of it, but it wouldn't be a major time extension.
Okay.
Nels, can you, on page 12 of the 2021 document, there's Schedule B that has the timeline. And we're now close to 3 years since this was signed.
Yeah.
But unless I'm misreading this, it sounds like this has already been extended several times.
It kind of got kind of like told for the DEC negotiations. So, yeah, I mean, there was one formal extension we did, at least, or maybe there's more from the think of it.
Cause this looks like 585 days. And we're at, you know, like, I don't know, 1,000 days at this point. So without having done extensions or some other special provisions, how is this even still alive?
there is a termination date in the agreement that beyond all other things has passed. But again, we did I looked for the resolution, it wasn't very clear, but there was acknowledgement by the IRA that the developer couldn't provide a real defined timeline for performance without knowing when the DEC negotiations would be concluded. So maybe it was someone informally told the timeline and kept it on hold until that DEC negotiations were completed, then started them up again, basically. But that's since April this year, and there has been no advanced progress. So we were giving, what was it, like 100 days to submit the plan, from April, 100 days would only be 3 months, a little bit. We were well beyond that time period. So that schedule of deadlines was really to build in the future disposition development agreement, knowing that it would take time to go through the environmental review process. We didn't know how much time it would take to go through the DEC process, and we grossly underestimated what it actually took, but we did get there. So that was the good news.
How are people feeling as far as this resolution versus extending them some more time? Go ahead, Donna.
I'm kind of in favor of voting on this resolution and starting over with a simpler RFP. This has been complicated all along. And as I said before, I think there were too many criteria stuffed into this little complicated plot. And there were disagreements about the height of the buildings in this otherwise scenic area. So it wouldn't be horrible to start over. I could also see granting a 30-day extension to see if they come up with a new hotel developer, but I'm not optimistic that that's going to happen. So didn't you say they're meeting with somebody December 17th?
Right, the developers are meeting with the potential hotel co-developer on the 17th of December.
So maybe by the IURA board meeting, they might say, hey, pretty please, can we have this extension?
Mm-hmm. They could indicate that yes, that hotel developer is interested in becoming a co-developer and, and is committing to take that role on of building a hotel.
For a 60-day extension at this point. I'm just not optimistic.
Any other thoughts on that extension or just gut feeling about the whole situation? And Chuck, weigh in. I can't see you through the back of my head, so jump in at any time.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that there are arguments on both sides here. I just think sort of in, the public good versus equity. I mean, if they're real and if they can make a go, no go decision in 30 days, then perhaps we can salvage this. I appreciate the fact that other developers could be concerned if we extend this much further. Also, if they gave the reasons for the delay that construction costs are up and interest rates are up, well, those conditions haven't changed a whole lot. So is it just bringing in this new hotel developer that's going to solve all the problems? So I think we have to push them to a go, no go, and maybe, splitting the time at 30 days is one way to do that.
Eric, do you have any opinions?
I think I'm sort of in alignment with what Donna had shared about a general pessimism about whether or not this will be resolved, after 60 days if it hasn't already reached some level of resolution. And that makes some good points too about cost. I don't imagine that those are going to fluctuate within the next 30 days in a way that's going to be, or 60 days in a way that will be much different in terms of putting together the project. And I'm also trying to factor in, Nels, what you had shared about not much gets done over a holiday season. So the value of a 30-day extension, which would begin When exactly?
Yeah, I actually was put that question to the developer, like, you asked for a 60-day extension, when would that start and when would that end?
Yeah.
I think pragmatically, it's gotta kind of be aligned with our meeting schedule, because what's the use of an extension if it's gotta go to at least the next IURA meeting,
Right.
which is, I think, January 24th.
So I guess in that sense, a 30-day extension that would lead up to the January 24th meeting, I could get behind, but it's hard to imagine beyond that. Supporting an extension beyond that. That's what I'm thinking.
Sean?
Yeah, I agree with what both Derek and Stefan said in that. I don't know how finding a new developer is going to radically change construction costs and interest rate challenges. I've seen some of the statistics about how much construction costs have changed over the past 4 years, and it is like pretty substantial in a way that has radically altered a lot of projects. So I would worry that finding the new developer is not necessarily the solution that they're hoping it would be. And I'm wondering if, as well, if we recommended terminating the agreement, and then at the IURA meeting, which is on the 20th, if we heard some feedback from how their meeting went about how suddenly everything looks possible and they have all these promising things to share, we could choose to make a different determination, but
Right, this is a recommendation coming
Yeah,
from this
right.
committee, not an actual binding action now.
right. So we could make the recommendation with the understanding that this is how we feel at this moment in time. And if there is for some reason totally different context that comes out of that meeting, we could reevaluate that, but move forward with terminating the agreement otherwise.
I'm kind of feeling where Donna is, that I'd be perfectly happy to vote on this resolution, and I don't feel particularly optimistic or inclined to extend a whole lot further, maybe not even at all, because of so much extension that has gone by without any demonstration of progress being made by the developer. And something that Chuck said about the construction costs and bringing in this new development made me realize we've got a developer who's bringing in another developer. That is not gonna make the project less expensive. It's gonna make the project more expensive, because now we have someone else who needs a cut, right? I mean, we're chuckling, but that's the reality. We've got a developer who knows how to build buildings, but they're gonna bring in someone else who knows how to build buildings. And now we are going to make it more cost effective? No.
I think that was always the case. There's always gonna be a hotel developer.
Right, but now we've got a new one when we've got more expensive construction costs. Like, I don't see how this is magically gonna work, and I think we might really, like, if we streamline a new RFP with fewer bells and whistles being demanded, we might get a developer who can actually build their own buildings, you know, rather than, this almost feels like we're subbing out or partnering with so many people, and it doesn't make it more cost effective, you know? So it feels like they've had quite a lot of opportunity to at least give the impression that they're serious about making this happen.
But to your point, if they're still really gung ho on this, they could apply for the RFP again.
Yeah, if they have a project that's miraculously gonna work now.
Well, it will if it's simplified.
Be cool. So we have a resolution, or we could amend the resolution, or we could say we're not prepared to vote and we want to do something else.
I'm fine moving the resolution.
Do we have a second? Siobhan? Any further discussion before we vote on the resolution?
But just to be clear, we're voting a recommendation.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much always the case. We make a recommendation to the IURA that might or might not follow ours.
Yeah, the resolution reads like an action item, but it's a recommendation to the IRA. So they would take this same resolution and consider it for a vote.
And do we have is there anything in the language of the resolution that anyone takes exception to, or any amendments that we want? I realize Donna and Derek, or I'm sorry, Donna and Siobhan, moved it as it stands, but if there's anything that we think is weird. And hearing none, so all in favor of the resolution as it's written? Oh, looks like that was not terribly contentious.
We could go back and fight about it.
No,
Yeah.
no, it was interesting though, in the conversation, I thought, okay, maybe it sounded like there was more feeling to extend some time, but maybe not.
Carries 5-0.
Carries 5-0.
Okay.
All right,
Again, this doesn't stop them from still being interested if they are. This kind of will flush out their interest probably.
yeah,
correct.
if they're serious, and I hope they are, I hope we have some good viable projects that come through the next round. New business. Election of EDC officers. Oh, boy.
Right, because Chris resigned from the agency, that left Leslie as vice chair, so we have to fill a vacancy as a chair. We did have elections in May, so, you know, there's no reason to necessarily change your position, but it's an opportunity to reconsider. We have to have one of the two officers be an IRA member of the committee, who's also an IRA member, so we have several in this group. The mayor told me he would be willing to serve as chair, but he does not feel he needs to be the chair. So just to give that context that he's open to do that, but he's not advocating for it, or
And he is staying on the committee.
he's planning to stay on for now. Right, I know we have 6 members, he makes a 4-person quorum, it's a little bit awkward, but this committee has always had good attendance, so maybe that won't be an issue. So either Donna, Siobhan, or Cantelmo would need to be one of those 2 members. We elect our own vice chair, and then we nominate the chair to the IRA to make a decision. So that's the quirky arrangement we have. And we currently have a sitting vice chair, so we don't need to modify that if we don't need to. So this resolution has links in it to fill in.
Would somebody like to be the chair? Somebody, as in one of you two or Rob? We could nominate Rob.
Does Rob want to do it?
He's willing to do it.
But does he want to do it?
He indicated some interest, but he didn't want to feel that he needed to be the chair either. If somebody else had an interest in it, he would defer to them.
Is he better at running orderly meetings than I am? Because
He's-
I'm perfectly happy for him to
He's
take
very
the
good at
spot.
running a meeting, that's true. That's a skill set he has.
I'll say that I would prefer not to be chair at this moment in time, as I don't feel very familiar with, the content and the history of this group, so I will defer to you, Donna and Rob.
Well, I don't mind being chair. But Rob has been the chair for the past couple of, no, he hasn't.
No, he
He
hasn't.
hasn't actually
meeting.
been to a meeting yet, has he?
Right.
I think he made one meeting, didn't
In July,
he? Yeah, I
the
think,
one I missed?
yeah, I think so, but we didn't have a chair that, I don't know if he made that July meeting, no, I don't think so. He made appointments, he made appointment of himself. As, so,
And he's the chair of the IURA
correct,
board.
as Chris was, for what, right?
Right, right. I'm just thinking about Rob's workload. I mean, I'm happy to do it if the group would like that. But I'm also happy for Rob to do it. I'm just concerned about his workload.
Well, having only chaired, a few meetings,
Mhm.
I can't say long-term, but it doesn't seem like it's really a workload. I mean, Nels will reach out. If there's a decision that has to be made about, do we cancel a meeting or do we move the date or whatever, he'll reach out and say, what do you think? And I will respond to an email and be like, I think X. And apart from the reviewing that we all do of the agenda, that's kind of the only real additional workload.
It's kind of a heavy lift to chair the, meetings in the spring. with
We
this.
don't have, well, we don't have additional meetings of this committee for the review of the grant process, but we have the additional meetings that are optional for members to
Okay.
come to attend.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily an additional responsibility. I mean, I would also do it too. I don't love it, but
Right.
I'm okay.
We will,
If people-
if we follow our schedule, we'll do another election in May of next year, so it's not a particularly long period of time either. That's something to consider.
Well, let's nominate Rob and then we can switch off in May or June.
And that's a resolution too, yes?
Yeah, there's a resolution that with blanks in it, and so the result would be that the IURA ED committee hereby nominates Rob Telmo as committee chairperson and further resolves that, I guess we wouldn't even need a further result, because we would just keep the vice chair as is. That's not an open position. We would just stop at that second. last
so
result.
so we nominate and then, so we're today going to nominate and then elect?
No, I think we'd only elect a vice chair if we want,
Oh, I'm sorry,
if you
that's
wanted
the
to be
vice
the
chair.
chair or something like that.
Yeah, no.
Because you're currently in the position and you were duly elected in May
Got it.
for a full year.
Right, sorry, I didn't see it said vice.
Yes, I would just eliminate that last resolve and just stop at nominating Rob Telmo as the chair of the ED committee.
Okay. Donna, did you move that? Sorry,
I move to nominate Rob Cantelmo as committee chairperson of the EDC.
I'll second that.
very good. Any further discussion? All in favor? All right,
All right, our business is complete.
look at us go.
This reports.
Thank you. So we have, action plan update, financials, all the
All the good stuff.
good stuff.
Yeah, just wanted to keep everybody informed that the annual action plan for the CDBG grant and the home grant is currently open. It started, we opened it up on December 2nd or something. The deadline for submissions is January 31st at noon. Anissa has already held her first public session today, and she has a couple more meetings set up for anybody who's interested. We're also open to one-on-one consultations with any not-for-profit organization that wants to explore a potential project. We do not know how much money is going to be available. This is money that would be available to disperse in September of 2025 is kind of the plan to think about September, October. But the federal government has to adopt 2024 budget first before they adopt the 2025 budget. So we're a ways away from knowing how much it's gonna be. So it's gonna be an anticipated amount. We think it will be a little bit less than this year's. And it could be a lot less. We don't know where the budget's gonna go. But there has been strong support historically for the CDBG program, less support for the home program by Republican Congress in the past. But I think people recognize a housing crisis is upon us, and the home program is very good at addressing housing needs. So, so if anybody has any questions about it or wants to get a little tutorial on it, Denise is very happy to sit down and talk to anybody or talk with any organization, you know, that might be interested. We primarily have to benefit, the project has to benefit low and moderate income persons or eliminate slum and blight. And be housing, you know, and for home, it's gotta be a housing project. It can be rental assistance, it can be construction, it can be homeownership assistance. There's a wide variety of different home activities. So we just wanted to let everybody know that that's up and running. terms of the financials, I'm happy to report that all of our borrowers are current on their loans. So that's really good news to hear. We don't have anybody, not chasing anybody. The lease payments have a couple of people who are showing up as past due, but they're all current as I speak today. So they're just a few days past in some cases. And the grants summary, which lists all the grants that are open, are now include the latest round of funds from 2024, because we got access those funds from HUD recently. And we look in pretty good shape with our spend down and our progress on the projects. There are a couple of them that are a little slow. We list no on the left-hand column if we have some issues, but these are issues that we're addressing. We don't think these are projects that are not gonna go forward. They're just experiencing some delays or some limitations. There's some good news on one of the projects that is yet to spend, which is the ski project, which Chuck is familiar with, which is what does ski stand for again?
Shared Kitchen Ithaca.
Thank you. They have achieved their fundraising goal. I think it was $200,000, which then gives them access to the Tompkins County IDA commitment of additional funding. So they have signed a lease. They are in the process of getting that program up and running and having a full complement of kitchen services and the facilities to support entrepreneurs in that space. Our grant funding provided some discounts for the hourly rate for low and moderate micro enterprises or individuals using the program. So really good news on that program. That's really great news to hear that has really made some advances. They're going to be located at what was the space for Green Star in that area, kind of on Buffalo Street, I guess is their address, I think, next to the railroad tracks in that large building. They're not taking the whole building. There's plenty of other tenants in that building as well. So really good news on that.
Great.
Probably about to get a Appalachian Regional Commission grant within the next week or so, as well, to pay for technical assistance and equipment. So we're starting to market to businesses to get them in there. Hopefully, realistically, probably February 1st. So we got to get the equipment in.
That's fantastic. Great work.
Yeah, it's impressive, the breadth of community support. It's really gratifying.
Nicely done, team.
Excellent board of activists, board members as well. Yeah. In terms of the loan pipeline, I do have one new loan application that has been received. It's for 702 Hancock Street, which is where Ithaca Coffee does their roasting activity. They would like to expand that activity to include retail coffee shop operation. So that has been sent to our underwriter. I hope that project, I expect it will be ready for a January meeting for a review of that loan. So that's one we have in the pipeline. We've had several other queries that haven't resulted in actual formal complete submissions. So we'll see if any of those pick up as well. So that's the loan pipeline as we have it. Anybody have any questions on? Not much to ask a question about there. And in terms of the staff report, I wanted to share with you, I put this map of the Ithaca Farmers Market in here because the IURA subleases that property to the farmers market. And they are now proceeding to their phase 1 improvement of the site. They're gonna have some, I think, a groundbreaking in a week or two. The phase 1 project is to redesign the parking area. Phase 2 would be the waterfront area. Phase 3 is the actual market building itself. So they are moving forward on phase 1. They don't require any additional approvals from the IRA for that because there's no buildings involved with that portion. They went out and got grant funding and they are improving publicly owned land that they have leasehold rights to. The way the leasehold agreement works is they essentially have use of the facility during market hours and for special events like weddings, but otherwise it's open to the general public at all other times. So that's good news as well. And then I wanted to mention that the city has will be submitting a Restore New York grant application, which is grants that Empire State Development, a New York state agency, makes available to assist municipalities that have vacant buildings or underutilized buildings. So The mayor helped select projects that were vetted for that $1 million potential application request. And chose the Water's Edge project, which is immediately adjacent to the farmer's market. It's that former DOT maintenance facility. They're committing to build 200 housing units, of which 20% would be below market rate units in phase one. And so that is the project that's moving forward for an application for the Restore New York grant program, which was just, they kind of hurried this one up because I think the last one was in May or something. But they wanted to make this program available for communities that had storm damage during those kind of freak July storms. So there's a priority for any community that has storm damage they can show. We don't have any documented Tompkins County storm damage. So we're at a bit of a disadvantage in this round for funding. And so it's a little bit of a longer shot than in past years, but we've had pretty good success with that grant program. And that's what I wanted to let you know. Or answer any questions you have.
Next meeting is January 14th.
Yep.
All right,
Is that?
anything else? Thank you, Chuck. We can
Thank you.
adjourn at 4:33.
Great.
For
Okay.
some reason, I have a hard time telling if it's 2 or 3, but now it looks like it's definitely 3. All right.
Then the clocks are not the same. So you get to choose.
Oh, that's true. Is that one correct?
I don't know.
That is
I
correct.
think you guys.
I think
Ron's
it's somewhere
computer.
in between the two.
There you go.
Go with the computer.
All right. Well, I'm
Thank
gonna
you very
run
much.
out of here
Thanks, everyone.
and, go to the Trumansburg School Board. Yay. The Trumansburg what? School Board.